Today I want to talk about a film I watched this afternoon, which really spoke to me for a number of reasons. It's a film called Poor Things, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, who previously directed The Lobster and The Favourite, both of which are films that are hilariously absurd and, a really great social commentary on people, on relationships, and funnily enough, on monogamy. To give you an idea of his previous work, The Lobster, which is probably the film that Yorgos Lanthimos is most famous for, is set in a universe where everyone needs to find a partner to get married to, otherwise they are hunted down and killed, which creates a lot of really interesting scenarios for the people involved. And The Favourite is a fictionalized retelling of Queen Anne and her lesbian lovers who basically compete for her affection and who ultimately just make her feel lonelier than ever by the end of the film. So that's kind of a broad summary of the last two films that I've seen by Yorgos Lanthimos, which I really, really enjoyed. And so when Poor Things came out, starring Emma Stone, Mark Ruffalo, and Willem Dafoe, I was like, I definitely need to see this. So my polycule all went to see Poor Things together this afternoon. And when the film finished, and it's a long film, it's like over 2 hours, I turned to them and I was like, it's so cute that she ends up in a polycule at the end. And they were like, yeah, that's really adorable. I didn't think much of it at the time, but, a couple hours later, I'm kind of reflecting on it a little bit more. And I'm like, Poor Things encapsulates the autistic polyamorous experience. The premise of Poor Things is basically there's this woman called Bella Baxter. She's a kind of Frankenstein's monster type creation, but her origins are not really explained until halfway through the film. And essentially you get to see her grow up over the course of the film and learn more about life and love and just the curious things that people in society do, which is a great allegory for autism, right? Because so many autistic people go into the world not really understanding social cues, having to kind of learn the rules, just by trial and error, and then realizing that there are exceptions to the rules and being confused all over again. And Bella Baxter very much goes through this, during the film. Like, she does a lot of things and questions a lot of things that people wouldn't normally think to question, and who get really offended about her even questioning it in the first place. And so in that sense, I do think that it's a film I found extremely relatable as an autistic person. One of the things that Bella Baxter questions in this film is the concept of monogamy. She never says it outright. The way that she speaks is very interesting, and whoever wrote the script, I think, had a lot of fun writing her lines. Essentially, like in this film, the person who created her ends up betrothing her to the person who's been studying her, which is very fucked up dynamic, like very much like very weird kind of power things like being exploited there for sure. But after they get engaged, she ends up being attracted to this mysterious man who is affiliated with the person who created her. And he invites her to go on an adventure with him to Portugal, to go on like a romantic getaway kind of thing. Her husband-to-be is extremely pissed off about this and is like, we're engaged, why are you going? And she's like, well, I'm getting engaged to you. So, before we get married, I'm gonna go off on this trip. Why isn't this fine? And I found this so funny, because if you're gonna get engaged anyway, of course you're gonna have your fun before you go, right? That makes so much logical sense. It's kind of why bachelor parties exist and things like with strippers and all of that stuff. Like, she's basically doing the equivalent of that. And so Bella Baxter essentially goes off and has this romantic holiday with this guy who just turns out to be a bit of a loser. He is, very misogynistic, very possessive, very controlling. And, eventually over the course of this trip, she starts to, grow out of him essentially, because she's growing up over the course of the film. And at some point she's kind of developed enough as a person that she starts to realize how incredibly incompatible they are and how she's no longer attracted to him. But while she's on this romantic getaway in Portugal with this guy who's like, just a rake by like all definitions of the word, she does go on her own little sexual adventures. She describes like some guy kind of touching her inner thighs, and she talks about this like, there's nothing wrong with it, to her lover essentially. And he gets so upset at her. Like, he is like throwing things, he's shouting, he's crying, and she's just like, you know, she's like, what is going on, right? And so that was another beautiful moment where I was like, yeah, like we're on a romantic holiday, you know, like, and I went out and I had this adventure, you know, why is this so upsetting to you? At one point they end up in some dire financial straits, and she decides to make some money by going to a whorehouse and becoming a sex worker. And when she comes back with, you know, some food and croissants, like, for them to share, you know, delighted about, like, her problem-solving abilities, he gets really mad at her. And he says to her, you know, things like, you know, you've whored yourself out. It's, like, the worst thing a woman can do. And she's completely befuddled by this because she's just like, I enjoy sex. Now I can have sex for money. It's a lot of money. I've gotten you some food. Why are you mad? And he's just like throwing the food that she's giving him away. He's really upset. He's crying. And she's just here like being completely confused about what the fuck he's so upset about. Anyway, obviously things end between them pretty soon after that. And at some point after, you know, getting bored of her life as a sex worker in the brothel, she returns home. And by this point, you know, she's seen a bit more of the world. She's definitely matured as a woman. And yeah, definitely has taken on a different worldview. And their relationship to her has changed as well. Because while she was gone, you know, both her husband-to-be and the person who created her realized that, yeah, like they did actually form an emotional attachment to her and weren't just kind of seeing her as a subject. One of the first things that she does is, like, when she comes back, she, you know, her husband-to-be ends up kind of bringing up their engagement. And she mentions to him that she was a sex worker. She was like, yeah, you know, I had sex for money. You know, does this bother you? And he ends up saying something that I found so incredibly beautiful.
I find myself merely jealous of the men's time with you, rather than any moral aspersion against you. It is your body, Bella Baxter, yours to give freely.
And I was like, wow. You know, I know this is in a sex work context, which is slightly different from like a non-monogamy context, but still, you know, the way that he expressed himself was just so wonderful. And it really just showed how much the connection between them had matured and how the kind of, you know, the power imbalance was, you know, still a bit strange, but like, you know, had corrected significantly from, you know, before, when she was basically the equivalent of a child, and he was betrothed to her by, you know, this person who was just kind of like, I need you to do this as a scientific experiment kind of situation. Anyway, there's a third person who ends up coming into the picture, and turned out he's the husband of the person that she used to be, like, prior to, you know, her transformation and her recreation. And so she goes and lives with him for a while, and he's also a misogynistic asshole, to no one's surprise. And yeah, like, they have another conversation around monogamy, because at this point Bella Baxter is very much used to her freedom, and she doesn't like the idea of being trapped. And this is a narrative that keeps coming up over and over. She doesn't want to be trapped in the home. She doesn't want to be trapped in the relationship. And this is something that her ex-husband, you know, really took issue with. Anyway, she eventually gets rid of him. She goes back home. Her creator dies, which is a very, you know, kind of like touching ending. The final scene is her in her garden with a lesbian lover who was one of the other sex workers at the whorehouse that she was working at, and her husband, and they're all, you know, drinking in the garden, and she's reading philosophy books, and she's just having a nice old time. And so, yeah, like, essentially, you know, like, at some point they went and picked up her lover in Paris, brought her back, and now, like, they all kind of live together, or maybe they're just kind of hanging out, I don't know, but they have a harmonious relationship, and her husband doesn't seem to be bothered by the fact that, you know, she's kind of brought her lesbian lover to tea. So, yeah, like, and that's kind of how the film ends. And so I was just like, this is adorable, you know? Like, this is a woman who's just really wanted life. She wanted freedom, she wanted independence, she wanted individuality, and she found people who understood her for who she was, who, you know, kind of learnt to roll with her quirks, and yeah, who kind of fully like accepted her. Yeah, like, it was just really lovely, like, despite kind of like all the challenges and the kind of circumstances of like how she was created, that, yeah, like, she was kind of able to make her own way in her curious little life. It's a very weird film. Like, if you've seen Yorgos Lanthimos' films before, like, you'll know that he has like a very strange kind of like filming style. He used a lot of like fisheye camera lenses and kind of a lot of like pinhole effects, and the world that Poor Things is set in is also so fantastically colourful. Like I said, it was retrofuturistic, so there's kind of elements of like period clothing, but also like futuristic tech, like cable cars and things like, and blimps and things like that. And it's just, you really kind of immerse yourself into just the fantastical nature of it all. And you watch this person kind of navigate the world in a very kind of just confused, autistic way, but kind of find their own way and find people who accept them. So many things that I think a lot of neurotypical people probably wouldn't bother to question, like, just various routines of like polite society and like norms and relationships and like what's appropriate and not appropriate to ask about. These all get kind of thrown into question over the course of the film, and so I really enjoyed watching that. I thought it was really funny and really enjoyable. So yeah, I definitely did not walk into Poor Things expecting it to be such a beautiful story about being polyamorous and autistic, but I definitely came out of it reading it that way, and I do think it's worth a watch. So, if you've gotten to the end of this review, unless you're the kind of person who just likes getting spoiled, you've probably already seen it. So let me know if you agree, whether you have, your kind of polyamorous autistic headcanon for Bella Baxter like I do. And yeah, let me know if there are any films that aren't explicitly about polyamory, but kind of give off a vibe, like this one. And, apart from Poor Things, I also highly recommend you check out Yorgos Lanthimos' work, in particular The Lobster, which I think is a great commentary on monogamy. And The Favourite is also one of my favourite films, just because it's really gay, it's period drama, it's hilarious. And yeah, it's just a great time. So I'll definitely be continuing to check out Yorgos Lanthimos' stuff. His film Poor Things definitely did not disappoint, and Emma Stone and Mark Ruffalo were absolutely fucking excellent. So, definitely watch it for them if nothing else.